Today we're going to be talking about fantastical body parts. So, many games have characters with exaggerated or unrealistic physical characteristics, and this is something that humans have been creating in art for millennia. Joining us today is my mom.
Hello there.
Hi, Mom.
Stylized bodies can be flavors just like everything else, and I've talked about flavors before on my YouTube channel, but I should probably reiterate it here for new listeners. So, flavors are what I use to describe kinks or fetishes, but I felt that the word kink or fetish kind of had a negative connotation around them. So I created a new word for them I thought would be helpful. And I think Flavors does a good job about that. Kind of reminds me of ice cream flavors. So, there are a ton of them, and people usually have their favorites that they like, and sometimes they want to try a new flavor.
So, it's been, 30,000 years that we've been doing this for?
Oh, at least.
And these can be flavors just like a bunch of the other things you cover. So where are we going to start with this, Mom?
Well, I thought we could use some examples from art history to kind of set the tone, right? Because when we're talking about these games, they're a modern art form, but it's not like humans haven't been creating art for a huge span of our existence, right? And some of that does actually involve these exaggerated body parts.
Technically, wouldn't this be art prehistory?
Okay, fine. Fine, art prehistory, because it's not written down. Although, I mean, if it's on the walls or if it's in the statues and it's, all right, I guess it's archaeology.
Yeah.
Fine.
So
Okay.
you're going to start with the Venuses?
Yeah, so I thought I'd start with the Venuses because they're one of the oldest forms of art that we know about. We call this category of art a Venus because it is a female form. It's typically stone, usually pretty small, so either sort of palm size, like you could hold it in your hand, maybe a little larger, but they are found all over Europe, and they are sort of ranging, I would say, sort of in the 30,000 years ago range. So you get some that are a little older, some that are a little newer, and a lot of these forms are female human forms, and they are very fat bodies. They're giant breasts, giant hips, giant butts.
Very exaggerated.
So it's
yes.
Is this a PHAT or an FAT?
I don't know. What is that? What is that? Wait.
Oh my god.
Yo, that girl is fat.
Fat.
That's PHAT.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
I know that.
She might be too young for that.
I don't
No,
know.
I know that.
Okay.
Sure. It's okay.
Well, so
I'm proving to you that I'm
Just
old.
like you totally
Hold
knew
on.
the Bodyguard movie.
wait a minute.
All right.
Don't we call that thick now? Thick
Oh
with
yeah.
two C's.
Yeah, two C's. Yeah.
Okay, fine. All right. So fat is before thick. It's the same
okay,
thing.
yeah,
Anyway,
okay.
they are that, right? So they are, they have a lot of extra flesh on them. And it tends to be in boobs, bellies, butts. So
Yeah,
the three
yeah.
Bs, right?
The 3 Bs.
Yeah.
Is that what they say? Or did you just come up with that?
So that's a phrase that you can use to actually talk about girls' dress codes in high school. So like if you're showing boobs, bellies, or butts, you're not meeting a dress code.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, where
okay.
does shoulders fall under that?
I believe it's head, shoulders, knees, and toes.
Oh, jeez. Okay. All right. So anyway, so you're looking at kind of, can we call them erogenous zones? Can we call them secondary sexual characteristics?
I think it's where we store fat, and it's in for women specifically. Before the 20th century, the number one killer of Homo sapiens was starvation. So, finding people who have been able to find enough food, find enough calories, avoid disease, avoid sickness, so that they have carried this much weight, that was, you're more likely to have a successful pregnancy. You're more likely to survive and bear more children. And, finding these idealized, because, I think that's, when we talk about fantastical, it's some ideal. It may not be your ideal, but that's why it's a flavor. Not everybody's going to like all the flavors. Not everybody's going to like all of this. And you've got these Neolithic carvings of these idealized women.
Yeah, what you say is absolutely true. The idea that we are representing figures that would be more fertile than the average woman in that time period is something that scholars have thought for many years, although I know that there have been other ideas kind of put forth, because the figures don't usually look pregnant, which is why some scholars are thinking that they might actually not be fertility, but they might be related to survival, which goes with that caloric, output. I would think that would also make breastfeeding easy, if you've got extra fat reserves, so you might be more likely to keep your child alive.
One of the difficulties when we're dealing with fantastical things, because I think it is safe to say that no human ever looked like any of these carvings when they were making these. Okay. The difficulty is, because it is fantastical, because it is, this ideal, you're never going to see that. You're never going to have it. So trying to find this makes sense 100%, that would be like going into a furry game and trying to find out, how it's physically possible. Like Catgirls, do they have 4 ears? Do they have 2 ears? How does it work when they have 2 ears? Trying to dig into a fantastical thing and make sense of it, we want to be careful with that.
I like to think that Catgirls can hear out of all the ears, all 4.
But wouldn't the cat ears be better, and would it be interfering? I don't know if it would be helping.
I don't know. I mean, what about multiple sets of eyes with creatures with multiple sets of eyes, like spiders?
Okay, but they're the same eyes though. They're not 2 completely different ears. 2 sets of ears.
Yeah, 2 sets. Okay.
And then, of course, with some Monster Girl art, you get multiple breasts beyond the 2 you have. And so, how does that work? How does that function? How does that impact your center of gravity when you've got what is supposed to be a 4-legged creature with these udders, and now we're going to make them a biped? How are you standing up? It's ridiculous to go too far into that. I mean, you can if you want, but...
Yeah, well, and one of the, I think we probably want to be careful with that here, because a lot of times there's no head on these statues. So it's just the bodies. There's no head, there's no hands, there's no feet. It's just the torso,
it's
basically.
more of an abstraction.
Yeah, like a little bit of the legs.
Yeah, the thighs particularly.
Yeah, and
because
butt.
you have to be able to show the butt, and you also generally there's some sort of defined pubic area that makes it very obvious what that is, right?
Yeah.
So listen, honestly, they do kind of look like modern art to me. If you imagine it in like a really, shiny white marble, or if you imagine,
like steel.
Or if you imagine it in steel, or if I could see how these could actually be modern.
Yeah, you just polish them up.
So we're once again reinforcing the idea that none of this is new.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. This is not the only time. It's not like we did this 30,000 years ago and then we never did it again until today, right? So if you look at the Greek athletes' bodies from all the sculptures in ancient Greece, very few people would have looked like that, but because it was an idealized form, it was the one that people chose to represent, right? Then you can move to the Renaissance, when we were, back to copying classical forms, but we were also thinking about new sort of big, exaggerated, kind of curvy women again, right? So there's the phrase Rubenesque, talking about Rubens, who was part of the Northern Renaissance, and he painted women with very large thighs and really elongated bodies. So like if you were to actually stand these bodies up, they would look really strange. So his are usually reclining. So if you were to stand them up based on their proportions, yeah, kind of, but thick also.
Thick Slenderman.
So, but the weird thing is, like, if you look at their arms are like Slenderman. So you've got all these weird exaggerated proportions. These would not have been attractive people in real life.
But then you're making a judgment there. I mean, if we're talking about these abstracted things, I mean, there are people who find these forms, these abstractions appealing, attractive, and I think that's the whole point of this. Just because we find it weird, or you find it weird, or Annie doesn't find anything weird.
No. Listen, I was thinking I was thinking of one particular painting,
Uh-huh.
because it's probably the most exaggerated. But you're right. I guess that is a judgment that I'm making, because I look at it and think, oh, that would be strange if it stood up, right? That figure. But you're right. Lots of people have found that to be an erotic painting over the years.
People find the Slenderman attractive.
Oh.
I think that would be your episode on horror and monsters.
I mean, it could.
Yeah, I think
I
that'd
can go
work.
into how people find, the tall, kind of unknown figure to be attractive.
Should we talk about your relationship with the Babadook?
No. No. People say that it's not scary, but that thing is terrifying to me.
You've got like Babadook PTSD.
I really do. Top hats, especially.
So what you're telling me is all art from the 19th century is out?
Oh my God.
Well, Western
Yeah.
art.
Well,
Yeah.
all Western art.
Because
Anything with a top hat.
Catgirls, are from the Edo period. They first emerged from the Edo period. So Catgirl art, I think she'd be okay with. Because I
Probably,
don't think top hats would have infected Japan yet.
Probably not.
So that's interesting. So they were doing Catgirls in the Edo period. So there's also another kind of image in the Edo period, and they're called Shunga. And I'm probably mispronouncing that. But they are really interesting because they're paintings, and I think they're on scrolls. And they are meant to be like wall scrolls, and they're meant as, I think, sexual instruction, almost like the Kama Sutra, maybe, showing different possibilities for positions.
Yeah, for like sex ed. Maybe.
Yeah, yeah. And the interesting thing about them is that they have these really exaggerated and very detailed genitalia.
Yeah.
And everything else is just like a basic line drawing.
Yeah.
Wait, and there's no pixelation?
No.
Are you
No,
sure this
in
was
fact,
Japan?
it's kind of the opposite of that.
Because
Because
there's a huge focus on it.
yeah, and if you look at the compositions, it's often like literally in the center of the picture, and everything else is sort of, they're showing you like which tab to insert in which slot. So
So I think we've got to the premise where this is not something new.
Yeah.
And full disclosure, we're having this episode probably because I made fun of the size of the genitals in Treasure of Nadia in the last episode.
Oh, I haven't even talked to you about Roman art.
We'll get there.
Okay.
And Annie is basically no shaming me, so my bad. I apologize. What games do you have for us, Annie?
Well, I have a collection of games that I think, show a very specific type of body shape, and I think it would help to...
They each show a specific type of body shape.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Very particular to that game, and that's why the developer made them. I have about 5 games, maybe 5 or 6, where I have each of the games have a idealized body type, and so it can be seen throughout all the characters that are in those games.
So what do we have first?
So first we have Treasure of Nadia, which is, I think, a game that pretty much everybody is aware of, and because it's kind of like a gateway game, like being a dick. It was actually my pick for Adult Game of the Year in 2021. So, and I made a whole video about that, which they can see on my channel.
But let's pretend that there are some people in your audience that may
like
not
me.
be familiar with it,
Yes.
like Mom.
Yeah.
Okay, so this game is an RPG, and it's kind of like, think of like Tomb Raider or Indiana Jones, Pirates of the Caribbean.
Okay, all
like
right.
those types of themes with like treasure and treasure hunting.
Treasure
Yeah.
of Nadia. Of course. Sorry.
That makes sense. I literally did not even think about that until right now. So this takes place after the first game, Lust Epidemic, which you don't need to know about, but
you disregard that piece of information.
you can play Treasure of Nadia without having previous knowledge from Lust Epidemic.
Great. Okay.
But if you play the third game, it makes you want to go play the first game. It's very confusing.
Yeah. There is, I guess, there is an overarching story that connects all the 3 games together, so...
Okay.
But in Treasure of Nadia, you've just found out that your recently deceased father was a treasure hunter. And so now you have to kind of fill his shoes as that treasure hunter.
Oh.
And then you find out through a lot of things happening, that there is actually an ancient treasure where you're kind of like living on a seaside village. And so now you're trying to get the treasure before these other treasure hunters. And yeah, it's a lot of clues and quests. And
so are you
puzzles.
playing as Indiana Jones or are you playing as Lara Croft?
You're playing as Indiana Jones.
Okay.
I would say you're playing as like Indiana Jones kid. He's not as cool as Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
And you're
So
basically
you're
trying,
a male protagonist,
but
is what
don't
you're
worry,
saying.
Yeah.
Lara Croft
Okay.
is a character in this as well that you'll get with.
Got it. Okay. All right.
know.
So you're playing as a male character.
Because there's a competitor female treasure hunter.
Oh, yeah.
So what body type is being idealized in this?
Well, I think I would say like the thick style, the with the 2 C's.
Okay,
Yeah.
now are we talking, we were just talking about the Venus statues. Are we talking that level of thick?
No, I would say more like hourglass style. So, like a bigger chest, a skinnier waist, and a bigger butt.
But I'd almost say like that description, but then Amazonian. They're all fit. They're all strong.
Yeah, everything's like
Interesting.
toned.
Yeah. So this is definitely it's like the island that Wonder Woman is from. If all of them had hourglass figures, exaggerated hourglass
Instead of
Yeah.
having the boob cut off. Got it. Okay. So that's interesting because that actually feels a little bit like kind of the idealized figures that we got at the end of the 1800s and then up through, I'd say, like 1960. Now, that's not, it's not in every decade or in every location, but when I'm speaking, my knowledge is basically centered primarily in Europe and North America. So please understand that there are going to be things outside those areas that I may not know about. What I'm thinking of when you say that is this idea of using a corset or a girdle to, which is, a girdle is basically just a corset made out of elastic. Okay. To squeeze in that waist until it's teeny tiny, and then using like padding, either padding out the bra or having a really full skirt that makes that waist look even tinier and makes the hips and the butt look bigger. And we see that in, I guess, really starting in about the 1860s with the giant hoop skirts, but then going all the way through the 1950s with those little housewife dresses that you see in all the cute little 1950s ads for like soap. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Be a real woman, use this soap. Okay. So those kinds of silhouettes were definitely idealized for quite a long period of time. That's not a new silhouette.
I feel like the ones for Treasure of Nadia, though, are very exaggerated more than like the 1950s. Like when I think of the 1950s, I kind of think of like a slimmer hourglass. Like the boobs are still small and the waist is still, it's like really small, and then like the butt is still small.
Yeah. So are you thinking like, how does she have space for her organs, kind of small for the waist?
Yeah,
is that what we're looking at?
Well, that's how I think of like 1950s outfits.
Okay. So that's interesting. So it's even more exaggerated than those things, but it's the same kind of ideas. And that actually makes sense, because can humans actually have that particular figure that you're talking about? Like the one that's in the game?
Possibly with rampant inbreeding.
Yeah, I know, like a lot
Super
of
recessive quality.
a lot of
where
plastic
they
surgery.
a lot of plastic surgery where maybe they're missing a rib or two.
Once again, this is supposed to be, fictional exploration.
Yeah.
I think one of the problems is when we try to create these fictional things in reality, when we try to explain these fictional things in reality, that's where we start to get trouble. So, and I think that some of the people who would take issue with, the things you've talked about would be saying, well, this is treating women poorly. And I get the argument, because that's real life where, I don't think NLT Media injured any women in the making of this game. So I think that's an important distinction.
Definitely. And I don't think women that were wearing these kinds of garments, or people that were painting these kinds of, the women wearing these clothes, I don't think they were expecting women to
Actually look
that way. In fact, there were all kinds of edits in early photos that were actually, you can see in some early Victorian photos where they've done edits to narrow the waist and they've left the hips and the bust at the same.
How did they do that?
I don't really know, but I know I know that because they were done on the actual photograph itself, on the print, you can see them if you look.
It's so
there's
a white pen.
So listen, honestly, there has been photo editing and the idea of kind of filters, right, and body morphing since photographs existed, right?
So it's George Eastman's fault.
Absolutely, yes. That's Kodak, right?
So does that mean like we can't trust photographs from all the way since cameras were invented?
That's a big question.
I think that when the printing press was first invented, there were a lot of people who believed that if it was in a book, it was true.
Yeah.
And it took a reasonably long period of time for people to stop taking written word as testament. And I guess we're in the same kind of place with photos and images and video, where we're now learning, okay, we can't believe it like we used to. Maybe we never should have been believing it. But, but it makes it more difficult. And just as we got past that point with the printing press, hopefully we'll get at this point with, deep fakes and everything else.
And how long did that take?
You had, tens of millions of people die, so it wasn't a good.
let's maybe improve upon that process as part of progression.
That's why I was like, I hope not that I'm optimistic. Treasure of Nadia. So we have this idealized, and I think we would say, okay, this is your pick for like this idealized, more heteronormative kind of harem game.
Interesting.
But knowing you probably have run the whole.
I have a very.
Okay.
I have a lot of very specific things.
What do you have next for us?
So I was going to talk about how it doesn't always have to deal with the idolized body image of a woman, and it can also be with a man. So the next game that I'm going to talk about is called Robin Morningwood Adventure: The Welcome Secret.
Morningwood.
I was just going to say Morningwood. Okay, good.
I can't tell you how long it took me to say that name because I kept saying Robin Hood. But this is a game where it explores a very particular flavor, which is the Bara flavor. And that's basically a very muscular and sometimes hairy gay man.
So what you're saying is this is basically the Masters of the Universe with He-Man and Skeletor and everything else. Now, I'm not saying He-Man was gay.
Did He-Man have body hair?
Some of them did, and the toys did.
Toys?
The toys, you'd have, some of them would have the.
Was it like hairy, or
no,
was
it was
molded.
Yeah, the mold.
Molded on.
No.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Oh, that. I don't know if it's grosser with or without the toy.
And then
on the toy.
Of course, there was even.
I mean,
Beast,
I guess
there was even Beastman, which was actually
texture.
Yeah.
He had like arms, like is Beastman the blue one? That's like.
I don't even know what we're talking
what
about
is
now.
that one? Is it X-Men? No, it's not.
Shut up.
Which one is it from?
Okay.
It's the one with Wolverine, right?
Okay, that's actually we are completely. That's the Beast.
Oh.
And he is blue, and he's a scientist. I believe his name is Henry.
Yeah.
Completely different.
Right,
all of this stuff kind of bleeds into each other, and you've lost your mom now.
Sorry, I'm lost.
I apologize.
I'm lost.
I apologize for deviating into He-Man.
Okay. Yeah, listen.
Okay, so I'll say a little bit about it.
Okay.
So in Robin Morningwood Adventure, you play as an adventurer who has stumbled upon a village, and you're kind of just tasked with fixing up the village. They're kind of just like, hey, our village is kind of broken right now. Do you want to be in charge of that? And you're just like, there's no actual answer for no. Like, there's no, you can't
decline. They're like, well, then you don't get to play the game.
Can stop playing the game.
Okay, all right.
That's your choice.
I guess.
Okay, fine.
And so you're pretty much, tasked with fixing up buildings, preparing them.
And they pay you in sex.
Do they?
No, they pay you in coins and resources.
Now, question, do you spend the coins and resources for sex?
I don't know.
Interesting. So how do you get the sex?
You can increase your relationship with them, kind of like Stardew Valley style. So you get interactions with them continuously, and like you just like keep talking to them, and their heart meter goes up.
Oh,
and
so
then
you gotta work for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, like Stardew Valley.
Okay.
And so it's an RPG, has a lot of quests, turn-based battles that kind of reminded me of Pokemon battles, and then pretty much a mini game for everything that you do. You would have.
Wait, is there sex in Stardew Valley?
Well, there's relationships.
Yeah,
so
and
there's not explicit sex.
No,
but
there's implied
yeah.
because you get a child.
Interesting. Okay. All right. I didn't realize that.
I'm sure people have added mods.
Yeah.
Who knows?
So that's okay. So we have big, really muscular,
Oh yeah, really muscular.
and
There are
sometimes
some-
hairy men.
Yeah,
Like
sometimes.
absurdly muscular, not available in the real world kind of
yeah,
muscular.
because- like orcs.
It is.
Do you know orcs?
I do.
It is absurdly. This would be. Sticking with the He-Man.
The He-Man. I mean,
Only
his
because-
proportions are obscene.
Well, and you know,
You know what? Here I am being judgy again.
Yeah, well-
what I meant was they are.
unrealistic.
Yeah.
And if He-Man is sized up to 6'1",
Okay.
given the amount of muscles he has,
Right.
supposedly he would weigh about 720 pounds.
Oh
which
my God.
There's no way his heart would be able to support
Yeah, he'd
that
be like
much, that much human.
he'd be like Andre the Giant. He'd have a heart attack at 35.
Yeah, how big was Andre the Giant?
Really big, bigger than 6'1", but I'm thinking he wasn't 700 pounds.
Yeah, 720 pounds is what they said for. And there's a picture of Wilt Chamberlain and Andre the Giant holding Arnold Schwarzenegger.
That
by the
made him
arms.
look
It makes him look
teeny.
like a small child.
Yeah, it does.
And I
And
believe
you
it
don't-
was from. I believe it was from when they were filming Conan the Destroyer.
Oh, he was in that? Andre the Giant?
He was not, but
Oh,
Wilt
okay.
Chamberlain was, and Arnold was.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so it's kind of
Crazy.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
So these are, once again, this is an idealized style, just like these
Well-
women were an idealized style in Treasure of Nadia, the ideal of the developer. These men are once again an idealized.
Yeah, that's interesting because I immediately think of Italian Baroque sculpture. So
Who wouldn't immediately
yeah.
think of Italian Baroque sculpture?
Hear me out. Think of all those fountains in Rome that have like the Greek and Roman gods, coming up out of the waters and things, and they are really muscular. They kind of look like maybe the Triton in The Little Mermaid. They have those kind of
Oh,
proportions, right?
Yeah.
And there's no way that anybody is looking like that in real life, but they were. Look, they were Greek or Roman gods, and so they were supposed to be bigger than life, right? And we were in this period really thinking about, like, sometimes you can see the veins and the muscles in the like carved into the marble, which was really cool. But the whole point was we were looking at these not as something
Like
to
sexual.
No, I think some people would have found
found them very sexual.
There was no TV, there was no
Especially-
movies. Come on.
and especially some of them were actually portraying sex scenes.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I would think
from
because
mythology.
I would think it because it was more normalized then. So people were very...
Well, what's interesting is that you have to at this time period, the statues of these mythological stories are the ones that you can see without clothing. If you look at the portraits of people in real life, they're all very clothed and covered.
Oh,
Yeah, so it was really interesting. It gave them a lot of freedom to show these sexual ideas, right?
So what you're saying is this summer we should go to Greece and look at fountains, and Annie can do an expose on fountain sex.
Fountain sex?
Fountain sex.
That's...
I mean, it's an idea. It's
We'll
really
work-
hot
we'll
in the
work on
summer.
title.
We'll work on the title.
Needs a little bit of workshopping there.
All right, well,
Yeah.
I apologize. What do we have next?
So the next one is called Fattening Career.
Oh, God.
And so... What?
Now, hold on.
Yeah?
Is this...
Fattening?
Yeah.
Isn't this
fattening.
something that Patreon is, like, recently specifically going after?
Yeah,
Okay,
they are.
all right. So
But
you're not endorsing this. You're just saying it is one of these themes that we are
I'm
going
just
to
talking
explore.
about it. Yeah.
Okay.
We're just
So-
talking here.
Yeah, we're just talking here.
All right.
Yeah. So this is a weight gaining game where you can choose to make the love interests, bigger. I guess you can choose not to.
Like
but
you're fattening a goose to make them into foie gras.
That was so judgy.
So yeah, seriously,
I'm asking. Hold on, though.
Hold on. Take a moment.
Okay, sorry.
So just as we would want some idealized Treasure of Nadia Amazonian character, or some hairy barbarian in the previous game.
Yeah.
What in this game there is a emerging flavor which is around feeding and massive weight gain.
So wait a minute. So is the flavor the feeding, or is the flavor the body type?
So I think
it's both.
It's both.
Yeah. I think it's both. Yeah, the feeding part.
Oh.
Good. Like the act of feeding another person. And then
I guess feeding can be sexual.
Yeah, and then seeing their body change as they
And once again, it's a control thing.
Okay.
There are a lot of measurements in this game.
Okay.
Yeah.
The reason I was questioning is because the other two, it seems like the bodies were kind of pre-existing.
Where here
with
you're
the
putting
characters,
some work
but
into it.
yeah, but here it's like
one-
you're actively manipulating.
Like if it was a foot binding game.
Oh. Okay. Okay. Interesting.
We're just controlling and reshaping through lard. Crisco.
Oh, okay.
Crisco?
McDonald's.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah. So
Solidified fat.
yes, most
Okay.
of the food that is eaten is very fatty and sugary.
So it's my
on
life.
purpose. Oh my god.
Okay.
Let's go to
most
Long John
people's-
Silver's.
Yeah, honestly, most people's lives.
Where's Arby's?
So what are like the limits of what you can do? Does your character start out really thin and
Oh, so it's not your character; it's other characters.
so you're manipulating
Yes.
the other characters.
So you're the main
Okay.
character. You're just a guy, and you manipulate other characters' bodies.
Are there multiple female love interests?
Yeah.
So you're literally growing your harem in an unusual way.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, you are. Okay, so like for example, you have your teacher and she wants to be able to teach her class about nutrition better. So you offer to just stay with me and you offer to help her, and this involves her eating and gaining weight to show the class effects, how the food has effects on the human body.
Okay.
It's a very hands-on approach to teaching.
Hands on.
Oh
Yeah.
no. Did you hear that?
No, hands-on.
No. Say it.
Hams on.
Oh.
Stop. Hands-on.
Okay. Hold on. Okay. All right.
Where's the line between fat jokes and shaming? I don't know.
I think you're finding it.
I apologize.
Like, geez, just let me explain the game.
Okay. All right. Continue. Is that it, or
No,
is there
I
more?
have another example.
Okay. All right. Go ahead. Oh my God.
Stop.
Okay.
So you have a baker, and you have to help her with taste testing a variety of sweets.
Right. Obviously.
To help her with her business.
Yeah.
Because she has to know what
You're
they
really
taste like.
generous.
What is wrong with you?
That you are
I'm
really
just trying
generous.
to explain this.
I know.
And then you also have, this is the part where I find it really interesting. You have a lot of stats involved with this. So you can have measurements of their bust or their butt or their stomach, and then you also can like keep track of how much they weigh or how much their boobs weigh.
So this sounds like something that would appeal to people who enjoy spreadsheets.
No. Like looking at the metrics, it's very rudimentary. It's like, it's just...
Okay.
Here's
But,
this.
all right.
But the codification shows the change. The codification
Mm.
shows the impact. And for somebody who finds this attractive, for somebody who says it, that is a measurement of their impact.
That's interesting. So I'm trying to think where this might, be something. I mean, obviously, those Venus forms
I think
are kind of related to
I think
this.
from an example standpoint, I think it is
Yeah.
more common. Generally, we are used to type of control when you're limiting female caloric intake, as opposed to, I mean, you're still controlling the caloric intake here.
Sure.
It's just in a direction that is less explored than making the woman smaller.
Right.
Yeah, I do think this is a flavor that isn't explored a lot.
Interesting. That's just really fascinating to me. So it's almost like it's more about the control than it is about the body type. for the flavor itself, even though there is kind of an idealized body type that we're going for.
When are these games not about the control?
I don't know. I don't play these games. I mean, I hear you guys talk about them, but I've never actually played them. Don't have any desire to, so I don't. Okay, I don't know. Are they all? Do they always have an element of control?
I think sexual desire always has an element of control. Giving up control, taking control. What is the example you always give, Annie, in all the games? Every game has power exchange.
Oh, yeah. Because it's just, it's hard to not have a game that has power exchange. You know, you have a parental figure, that's power exchange. You have a boss, that's power exchange. You know, it's hard not to make a game that doesn't have power exchange.
And that's cool because, you know, we're exploring the fiction of it.
And people probably just don't see it as power exchange, and they just see it as what they like.
Because we don't want to think that what we like is bad. We don't want to think and putting a judgment on it. And it seems, looking at your comments and looking at what people say in your Discord and on the Patreon and YouTube, oftentimes you have people that are the people that are most aggressive in showing their disdain for one flavor or another have their own flavor, which from another perspective could be seen as exactly the same way as what they're denigrating.
Yeah. I can, especially with like NTR. I know I always bring up NTR, but it's a flavor that people just love or hate.
Yeah.
And it's,
So what game do you have next?
All right, so our next game is called Apocalypse. And this is, it's a pretty political game, I would say. So I'm not going to get too much into that. Deals with,
That's
politics.
Fair. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So, but it's basically how you survived a nuclear blast and are now mutated into this very, very big muscular guy that kind of reminds me of Arnold Schwarzenegger, but more like the Hulk.
Oh, like the Toxic Avenger, the trauma. He gets toxic waste on him and becomes this like mutant, jacked superhero, and he like beats people up with mops.
With mops?
Yes.
Mops.
Wait, are his muscles not good enough? Like he can't use his fists?
I think he was a janitor to begin with, and then he turns into this like roided out
I think I know what you're
monster.
talking about.
I think we've watched
that
it.
That feels ridiculous.
Oh, trauma movies are never ridiculous.
This game is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so you now have to survive in this new wasteland by going on missions, outside in the wasteland. You kind of have like this base where you're at. Where everyone who survived they're all mutated too.
Okay. I mean, this kind of feels like a lot of those sort of post-apocalyptic storylines so far.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
And you get skills to increase, and, of course, you build your harem.
Right.
But the idealized bodies, I would say that there are pretty much two. You have the bimbo body, where it's like the big boobs and small everything else, but I'm not really...
the lips and the other stuff.
Yeah. But bimbo, I don't know. It's a
pejorative,
word,
but you're using it as a descriptive. I mean, how would you say it otherwise?
I mean, maybe doll, but even then, I'm like...
No, hold on, though. I think doll might be the right word for it. If you're saying it's big boobs, big lips, and then we're looking at small everything else.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
And sometimes really muscular.
Listen, by the time you were born, Barbies looked very different.
That's very true.
But...
They look different now, too.
Well, okay. So in 1997, there was the first major revamping of the proportions because people were freaking out about it. But if you go...
Really?
Yeah. And so what they did is they made...
1980s?
No, 1997.
Oh, 97.
So when I was growing up and playing with Barbies, they looked like what you're talking about.
Oh, okay.
So when you had Barbies when you were growing up and... You played like 1,000 Ways to Die with the Barbies. You weren't like...
I feel like that's pretty...
I think that
I think that's
was not only on brand, but an excellent use of resources.
Exactly.
I have no problem with that.
Yeah,
but
like
what I'm saying is that before that shift in the proportions that happened, before you were born, there was this... they did a study to look... She would have had... If she was real... she would have had to walk on all fours because her feet were too tiny to support her body.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and she, like, her enormous head, she wouldn't be able to hold it up, so it would be like,
oh my God,
it would be like an infant, right? That you have to like hold the head in place because her neck wouldn't have been able to support her head. And then
horrific.
So if you and then they took it a step further. Hold on, no, I think this is hilarious because the idea that we would be thinking that these were real is hilarious. It never occurred to me to think that a Barbie was a real thing. I just thought it was I thought it was a toy like all other toys.
The problem with mental illness is that there's a real issue differentiating fantasy from reality. And to some degree, children have this problem as well, which is one of the reasons that we rightly restrict what children have access to. We don't want them to come to the wrong conclusions. We don't want them seeing the world not as it is. Now, one of the things that Instagram does, Twitter does, is that it is showing us a fantasy, and we're not telling people this is a fantasy. You mentioned earlier trusting pictures. I mean, you were telling me about the TikTok filters, Annie, about how...
Oh, yeah, how they're, like, already on. Like, you don't even put the filters on anymore.
So
they're kind of just like, they're defaulted on.
Oh, I know that some people that do vlogging have been having that issue for years because some of the vlogging cameras, it's actually difficult to turn that preset setting off.
So
on the cameras?
On the cameras, it comes with that as a preset,
weird.
like a blurring, smoothing kind of filter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So people exploring their fantasies in fiction.
Sure.
That's great.
Yeah.
People not being able to differentiate the fantasies from the reality, that's a problem. People with eating disorders, and we always link the studies. One of them, eating disorders, fantasy versus reality, dissociative states and eating disorders, an empirical Rorschach study. I'm not going to say that.
Rorschach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't.
That's okay.
Basically saying people with eating disorders were much more likely to have difficulty separating fantasy from reality, especially when it came to their body image.
Interesting.
And I guarantee you, if we were to look at school shooters and only look at school shooters, they would all be like, of course I played violent video games.
Okay, but the problem with that is how many people are playing violent video games and not shooting up a school?
Correct. Because the people who have trouble differentiating fantasy from reality...
It's almost like a survivorship bias kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not exactly the same, but it's that weird, oh, well, if these things happen, it must be the case for everything.
And they're only using the people like who have
the issues,
touch with reality.
Yeah, well, because the other people we don't have to worry about because they're leading normal lives.
Yep.
And they're not shooting up schools.
But when we do studies of violent video games,
right,
we find no evidence to show any increase in violence. And there were some studies that showed an increase in aggression, but the problem is, if you look at those studies, none of them controlled for competition.
Oh.
So competing tends to make people more aggressive.
Sure.
So the games that they picked were competitive games.
Oh, and not like other type. Oh, come on.
I know. Well,
really?
because I think that the people who put these studies together weren't gamers. The people who put these studies together didn't understand.
So you're telling me basically this is like them doing this study to see if wrestling makes people more violent by having them competitively wrestle each other?
So, or we would have, we're going to have them be competitive wrestling, and then we're going to have them play solitaire. And so
like
the one
right after each other?
The one game would be non-competitive, and the other game would be competitive.
Yeah.
In order to control for competition, both would have to be competitive games.
Interesting. Okay, so that doesn't work.
I just find it funny how they could just be wrestling and then like the next they go
over here dealing cards.
Well, but isn't that just chess boxing though?
Yeah. Oh. I don't even want to talk about chess boxing. So stupid.
Are we allowed to judge chess boxing? I don't know. It's not a flavor. Is that fair? Flavor chess boxing.
Well, I mean, you got flavor poker.
What?
Flavor card games.
Wait, time out. Really?
She just doesn't like card games.
Oh.
No.
It's a running thing with her.
Oh, wait. There are card games in this arena. There are card games.
Yeah.
And it's... Okay, now I'm familiar with strip poker as a sex card game, but that involves more than one player.
There's sex solitaire. Where it's like, solitaire is the card game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That you play solitary alone.
Yeah, and it's just like...
So is this a
pictures of-
masturbation game?
Technically, aren't they all? Or is this too meta?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I guess.
So,
All right. Anyway.
Okay.
what game do you have next for us, Annie?
Okay, so our next game I want to talk about is Superhuman.
Oh no.
You keep saying, oh no, to all these games I'm talking about.
Because you really are running the whole...
Oh, I want to
Yeah,
kind of just hit on everything.
You really are.
So in Superhuman, it's a very particular game where like
Kafka-esque.
it has like a lot of eldritch horror aspects that I'll get into in a second. Okay, so I'll say a summary first. So in Superhuman, you are attacked by this monster or alien or whatever you want to call it, and as a result, your body and your mind and your soul really begin to become something other than human, superhuman.
Okay.
American Werewolf in London. It's just, as opposed to turning into a werewolf, you're turning into an eldritch horror.
Is this an old
eldritch
reference?
horror Cthulhu?
Yeah, it can be like that, yeah.
Are they always tentacled?
This one's tentacled.
Is
so-
it? Okay.
Are they
like-
always tentacled? I think that there is a disproportionate chance of tentacles making an appearance when you deal with these types of things.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me at all.
That's yeah.
Well, and
Okay, hold on. There have been the ideas of tentacles. That's old.
Yeah.
Tentacles, because the idea of wanting more hands on you, essentially. And so that's kind of interesting. Okay.
And I think you get like 3, kind of like protruding out of the back of your
I
maybe
think
4.
that
I
I think that you're gonna have whatever the artist wants you to have with
okay.
your
Yeah.
hand-drawn
Oh, yeah.
game at
Yeah.
that particular moment.
Okay.
So you have new powers and new desires and an overwhelming sense of dysphoria as you struggle to cope with your like new reality as this superhuman, and you're kind of just trying to survive daily life at
Oh,
university.
so it's puberty.
Yeah, it's definitely that.
Yeah, and I bring that
okay.
up on my video that I covered.
Really?
With Superhuman. Yeah, and
Okay.
how like transformation is a fundamental part of the human condition.
Sure.
Not a single one of us goes through puberty without going through extreme physical, chemical, and cognitive changes.
Yeah. And I'm marching towards menopause, which is going to be the same super fun thing for me. Listen, getting old is awesome.
Yeah, so this game really idealizes, I guess, the transformation flavor and how that affects the body. So I didn't really know how to categorize the game because it does have, an obvious style that they're trying to portray. So you have the girls, the love interests with bigger breasts and smaller bodies. But the breasts aren't like Apocalypse style or Treasure of Nadia style. They're of its own, of the developer.
But physically, they're very goth looking.
That's true, I guess, yeah. Like the makeup that they wear
Sure.
is very goth looking. But
Clothes,
the
just the
clothes,
aspect.
yeah, everything's very dark.
Yeah.
Interesting. So is there one particular body type, or is it this idea of kind of not just transformation, but extra human? So, and by that, it's superhuman, right? More than human, like this combination of human and something wild.
Well, every one of these games so far, it's been a very specific aesthetic.
Right.
And I think the only limitation is possibly our ability to describe that
it.
aesthetic, because some of them were preformed, like Treasure of Nadia.
Right.
And you're going through with that. Some of them you're choosing to control, like the Fattening Career. And in this game, it's an involuntary process.
Interesting.
Yeah, like you're going through these changes, and it's a myriad of changes. And you're not controlling it. You're just kind of just letting it happen with, which makes sense, puberty.
Well,
Okay.
Once again, this is all fantastical. This is
Right.
all,
And you're having to surrender control in this because it's not really a choice, right?
and which is just another flavor to explore.
Right.
Yeah, the loss of control.
That's interesting. I mean, there's nothing new about this idea of combining part human and part other thing, right? I mean, you have this whole history of like sphinxes, right? Or minotaurs, centaurs. They're hybrid human animal creatures all over the world. So it's kind of just carrying on this really long tradition of the idea of being more than human.
So what you're saying is Annie's next game should be a Monster Girl game. All right, Annie, do you have a Monster Girl game for us?
Yes, it's called...
Of course she does.
Yeah.
All right. All right.
Yeah, of course I do.
Okay.
It's called Monster Girl Island,
Ooh.
which I feel like you can guess what that's going to be about.
So, is there an island?
Yes.
Are there monster girls?
Yes.
Fantastic. I got
Will
it.
the game ever finish?
No.
Oh, that's an issue with this one?
It's an issue in this space.
Okay.
Yeah, and he just fell into it. So
There was a Patreon issue, early Patreon issue. The developer took his game off of Patreon, and with the idea that he will finish it on his own time. That was years ago.
Well, in January, he stated that he was probably going to, continue the Monster Girl story just in other forms. My guess is probably visual novel.
Okay.
Yeah, in shorter, more manageable parts.
Right.
Because Monster Girl Island was this huge project that he kind of it was too much. So that's why it kind of
It was a
fell
3D anime style open world with all sorts of different.
Oh, honestly, so the open world thing, that seems almost unmanageable when I think about it.
And he wanted to do it all alone. He did not want any help from anybody.
Oh, so he thought he was superhuman.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that sounds unmanageable.
I think
it was.
I think when he
Okay.
went dark, he was like the 4th or 5th largest gaming Patreon.
Yeah,
He
because
was huge.
it's a good game. Like it's
Still
very-
available on Steam, right?
It must be hard
Yes.
if you, as an artist, because you have like a very specific vision of what you want it to be. I would imagine it would be very difficult to trust that vision to other people.
Yeah, especially in the space, it's hard to. Well, I would imagine it's very hard to get people to work in the company that you want to, make. And so I can see where he's coming from.
Okay.
Which is why you're looking for other developers, voice actresses, whoever in the industry to come on the podcast and talk about their game and their stuff. It won't be an ad for their game, but we can hopefully have an interesting conversation, at least before you get banned by Patreon.
Yeah, I can't really do anything about that. It's all up to them. But I did want to delve into what you were talking about, how people were like, they had that, I guess, animalistic side to the person.
Sure.
So the Monster Girl flavor or the monster flavor kind of does delve into a different set of rules when it comes to body shapes. So, some games have the Monster Girl flavor and they have a character that's very human looking.
Okay.
Like a human looking body, but they're like the color of the human is like red or blue or green.
Oh.
And then they have
Guardians of the Galaxy, that green girl.
Yeah.
Got it.
So
Okay.
she's supposed to be like an alien race, but she looks just like a green human.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
all right.
like that. But I think Monster Girl Island, explores the more, like I said, animalistic side of the monster flavor. So, for example, you have a shark girl who has a shark tail and a ripped body.
I thought it was Shark Boy and Lava Girl.
Different game.
Yeah, different game.
Okay, never mind. Keep going.
But you also have like a slime girl who doesn't really have her legs. Her legs are kind of like in goo because she's made out of slime.
Oh.
Yeah.
That would
Is she
be
like a
an
vampire? She can't go in the sun because wouldn't it like dry her out?
Or
she's
make her melt.
I mean, she's still in the sun.
Okay, it's
when I see
magic
her.
like Olaf the Snowman.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Why not? I mean, listen.
Listen.
It's all fantasy.
Yeah.
All right, keep going.
Whatever a slime girl does in the summer.
And then you have like this demon queen who has a snake tail, and so she kind of like slithers around everywhere. And then you have a spider girl with 8 legs and a spider body.
But like a human head?
Not really.
So it's interesting. So imagine the person.
How do you know it's a...
Just hold on.
Okay.
You know it's a girl because
It's boobs.
it has boobs and a vagina. And that's a very controversial thing that I just said, but I just realized that.
No, God, no, please don't. Please don't. Please don't.
I didn't. So you have
Within
the spider girl.
Well, look, this is all fantasy, so let's just frame it from there. Okay, keep going.
So you have the spider girl, and so imagine the person, and you have the spider back where like behind her.
Okay.
And so you have the spider body behind her, kind of where it's
Yeah.
like a
A
head
centaur
is.
spider.
Yeah, but you can still see her legs, and so she still does have like a vagina, so you can have
So
sex
you
with
can
her there.
penetrate her.
Yeah, but also under the spider body, you know, like you have
The spider girl is
Okay,
definitely a top.
I know I'm not saying anything
She is.
because, but it's
I'm
just
trying to explain.
It's
It's
just
hard.
because my jaw keeps dropping. I'm trying to imagine
You could
this.
just look at a picture
listen, I
and
could.
be
I'm-
up to speed.
All right, it's
Yeah.
fine. I will look at a picture later, maybe.
Maybe.
It's not happening.
Oh,
No.
okay. All right. So listen. So you've got all these monster girls on the island, but there's not like it's not about one particular type. It's about the combination is what you're telling me.
Yeah, and there's so many monster girls
Okay.
that I didn't explain. Like there's like a hornet one where it's like she has hornet's wings, a human body, hornet's wings, and a hornet like
Isn't there a
the
concert?
stinger tail thing.
Interesting.
Yeah, a concert. Yeah, with a cyclops.
Of course, with
Wait,
the cyclops.
hold on. There's okay. Never mind.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. All right. So, like, okay. I mean, I don't know that I have a whole lot to add here. I will say that just like with the other one that you were talking about, the Superhuman, I mean, this idea about combining parts of human bodies with parts of other creatures, right? That's nothing new. That's the idea that we can have like that
Chimeras.
and that we desire the attributes of these other creatures, things that we don't have, right? Maybe it's their strength, maybe it's their cunning, maybe it's their regalness, maybe it's their size, whatever. But the idea that we might be able to like be bigger than just human, I think that's a fundamental kind of desire in a lot of people. And we can see that in art over time. So this is just kind of like, it just feels like a continuation of a very long and storied tradition.
Do you think maybe people were creating these characters intertwined with animals because they had a attraction to those animals in
No.
real life?
No. We didn't have TV. We didn't have movies.
Yeah.
didn't-
I'm talking more like
We didn't
all
have
the way back
we
to
didn't
Greeks.
have books.
That's what they're talking. That's what he's talking about too.
The ways that we have to entertain ourselves
Yeah.
are very limited.
Yeah. I mean, I do think thinking about massive sculptural art as entertainment is kind of interesting, though, because thinking about the resources that would have been put into something like that, I think oftentimes there was some sort of power exchange involved in that, right? If you were...
I think it's reasonable to postulate that the primary form of entertainment was going to be music and stories.
Sure.
Just song, telling tales,
yeah.
sharing that.
Yeah. Didn't they just do that in tribes?
Well,
Like
yeah,
really?
and now they're saying that humans had language like 1 million years now before we
Really?
originally thought.
It's okay. We also used to think that
Animals didn't
Hold
have
on. What
language.
was it? It was only gorillas because we were able to teach them sign language.
And now
or
we know
something.
like all of these animals have language,
Yeah.
like prairie dogs and everything else. So
Prairie dogs have language?
They
Yeah.
do.
That's so
they
cute.
they have different yips for different predators.
That's so cute.
They're like, oh, rattlesnake. Oh, coyote.
oh, interesting.
So we were probably talking and sharing tales and stories way longer before than we originally thought.
Yeah.
And that's going to be your primary method of fantasy. That's going to be your primary method of exploration. But we do have cave paintings. We do have art. We do have
a lot of those.
animalistic things like that.
Sure.
And that's only what survived.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, it's just a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent is all that we have now. It's heartbreaking to think how much was lost, how much there would have been that we just will never see.
I mean, that's the case even just a couple of hundred years ago, right? Because so much of what we produce on a day-to-day basis isn't considered important enough.
They're like TV shows. Like, they're episodes of Doctor Who that they don't have.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
It's
Wait, what? Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like
early
lost
episodes.
Seasons or something.
Yeah, they just don't have because nobody kept it.
Nobody kept the films. They didn't think it was important enough. Yeah.
And it's crazy, how much is lost, especially prehistorical things, how much is lost. And, you talk about will games ever finish? How many of these games will still be around in 20 years, in 30 years? When Seeds of Chaos comes out in 30 years, how many of these games will still be around that you can play and you can still interact with?
And what format? In what format will people actually play games at that point?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe VR will become, advanced enough that people are just playing in VR.
And I think that the mistake some of us make is we point to these fantastical creatures, we point to these fantastical body whatevers, and we see them as something foreign, something bad, something evil, something sinful. And if we've all collectively been doing this for 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 years, obviously that's not the case. And as opposed to censoring it, as opposed to condemning it, as opposed to Patreon, doing what it's doing, and I know why they're doing it, we should be, I don't necessarily say that we have to accept it, but we should be more tolerant of it.
Well, I think eventually we learned how to teach people how to analyze books as sources, right? So, and I think probably, we definitely grew up with the idea of, you have to check your source and you have to think about the bias in your source and you have to see if it's from a reputable publisher and you have to, right? And so now we teach kids how to do that with, I know you grew up learning how to do that with internet resources.
Yeah, she doesn't trust any study from earlier than the 2000s.
I mean, that's probably not a bad idea. To be fair.
Yeah, even then. It gets
Listen.
She was telling me this study's from 2015. It may be too old, and I'm like, oh my god.
Okay. Oh my. You need a little ivory tower you can climb up? Okay.
She's tossing people off of them.
Oh no. All right. But I wonder if maybe we need to have more discussion around how we help people differentiate between fiction and reality in all kinds of media, right? It's not just games, right? It's social media, it's everything.
If people started having to differentiate fiction and reality, we wouldn't have Twitter.
Listen, I'm not a fan of Elon.
So, let's not go into that. Whenever she
so
talks,
much malice
whenever she
talks,
whenever she makes fun of Elon, she gets the Elon fanboys come out and threaten her and come after her.
He shouldn't talk.
Well, that's a whole other conversation.
Fine. Okay.
But I think there's definitely a lot to this. And one of the things you brought up about NTR, getting people who don't like NTR to be more tolerant of it, not accept it, not endorse it, just like any other flavor. And I guess we can do the same thing for huge, ginormous boobs and other fantastical...
Well, like I said, when I explained flavors, I feel like that's a very, people like what they like. Let's take ice cream flavors, for example. I really like mint chocolate chip ice cream, but I really don't like pecan ice cream. It's the same thing with the flavors that we see in these games.
So you're telling people to leave the nuts out of your ice cream?
Well, yeah, I'm allergic to nuts, so...
All right. Okay.
All right.
Okay, then. I know we're about to end, but I didn't get to talk to you about the best exaggerated penis that I found in ancient art.
I would love to hear about this.
Okay. I told you not to bring up Elon.
Oh, ew.
I'm pretty sure that's overly generous. So,
but it's definitely exaggerated.
Just in the other way.
Oh my God. All right. In 2022, in Spain, archaeologists uncovered an 18-inch carving, 18 inches long, and it was about 10 inches wide. And they haven't figured out why it was carved there. I mean, they're usually like symbols of like warding off the evil eye and good luck and good fortune.
Yeah, and strength.
Anyway, so, but 18 inches. And it looked almost exactly like the spray painted dick and balls things that you see like in graffiti.
Oh.
But anyway, giant.
Wait, so hold on. 10 inches wide?
10
So
inches
that's the
wide.
girth?
Yeah, so that
It's
would be like the
two-dimensional.
diameter.
Yeah, so was it like this, but like you could twist it around and it was like that, like very skinny?
Oh, man.
So it was
You're
like 10
saying it's-
inches like tall instead
No,
of wide?
no, it was 18 inches tall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
18,
Okay.
Like, so
How long do you think 18
I
inches?
don't
Once
know.
again, this is something that could be easily understood by looking at the picture,
Yeah, okay,
which
fine.
I'm sure they have.
I will link it. It's a great article. It really amused me. Anyway, I just felt like we needed to end this with a giant phallus.
So,
That makes sense.
Fantastic.
So if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out my YouTube channel, my Patreon, and my Discord, where I'm probably the most active. I also want to thank my mom for joining us today and providing her expertise on today's topic in the history of idealized body types. You can find the Shame Free Gaming Podcast on Spotify if you're interested in listening there instead of on YouTube. And all of the links to the games and studies that we've been talking about can be found on my Patreon. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.